The envelope had been opened, the name had been read aloud into the microphone, the room had erupted, and Ella Fitzgerald had not moved. She sat in her seat at the Grammy Awards ceremony in Los Angeles, February 1968, surrounded by the noise of applause and the faces of people turning to look at her, and she simply did not stand up. Not because she hadn't heard, she'd heard. Not because she was surprised, or rather, not only because she was surprised. It was something more fundamental than surprise, something closer to disbelief, the kind that doesn't resolve itself into action because the mind hasn't yet accepted the information the ears have delivered. Norman Granz, sitting to her left, lined in. "Ella, that's you. You won." Ella looked at him. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." She still didn't move. "Ella," he touched her arm gently. "You need to go up there." This is the story of what happened in the next 3 minutes, the longest walk to a podium Ella Fitzgerald ever took, and the speech she gave when she got there. The speech nobody expected and everybody remembered. The speech that broke something open that had been carefully closed for 34 years of professional performance. And this is the story of where that disbelief came from, the roots of it, running all the way back to Yonkers, New York, and a girl who had no business being on any stage and somehow ended up on all of them. Ella Fitzgerald had won Grammy Awards before. The first had come in 1958 at the inaugural ceremony for Best Jazz Vocal Performance. More had followed for the songbook recordings, for live albums, for individual performances that the Recording Academy had decided to recognize. By 1968, she'd accumulated enough of them that a reasonable person might expect her to have become accustomed to the possibility. She had not. Each nomination still caught her off guard. Each win still produced in her something that looked from the outside like gracious surprise and was, from the inside, genuine bewilderment. The bewilderment of someone who has never quite been able to reconcile the version of themselves that exists in public recognition with the version that wakes up every morning and knows all its own doubts. Norman had learned to position himself beside her at these ceremonies specifically because of this. He'd seen what happened when her name was called and she was left to process it alone, the frozen quality, the moment of not moving that could stretch into something visible and awkward if not gently managed. He sat next to her and he waited, and when the moment came he was there. "You need to go up there," he said again. "I didn't," Ella started. "I didn't think it was going to be me." "I know, it is. Go." She stood. The room registered this, and the applause, which had been sustained and warm, intensified. People were on their feet in sections, a ripple of standing spreading through the ballroom as she made her way toward the aisle. Ella Fitzgerald, 50 years old in 1968, walked toward the stage of the Grammy Awards ceremony at the pace of someone who was still not entirely convinced this was happening. She had put on her most careful exterior. She was dressed beautifully. She always was at these events, taking seriously the professional obligation of presentation. Her composure was assembled, the particular composure of a performer who has learned that the space between the seat and the podium is itself a kind of performance, requiring the same focus and control as any other. But underneath the composure, something was happening that wasn't composed at all. She was thinking about Yonkers, not deliberately. Not as a narrative she was consciously constructing to make sense of the moment. More like a reflex, the way certain things rise unbidden when you're in a state of heightened emotion, surfacing from wherever they live between their appearances. Yonkers, New York, where Ella Jane Fitzgerald had been born on April 25, 1917, to Temperance and William Fitzgerald, who were not married, who separated when Ella was very young, whose relationship had given Ella life and little else in terms of stable foundation. Where she'd lived with her mother and her mother's partner Joseph da Silva, moving between Yonkers and New York City in the way that families without fixed resources move, following work, following possibility, following whatever the next arrangement offered. Temperance had worked, had held things together in the way that women in her position held things together, through the particular kind of hard work that never gets called heroic because it's expected. She'd kept a home, kept Ella fed and clothed and in school, kept the ordinary machinery of daily life running on a budget that didn't leave room for the things that other children took for granted. And then in 1932, when Ella was 15, Temperance had died. Heart failure, sudden, without warning, the way deaths that come too early always seem to arrive, as an interruption that cannot be prepared for because life had not given any indication it was coming. Everything had come apart, Ella had. been sent to live with an aunt in Harlem. Then, as circumstances deteriorated and her aunt's situation became untenable, she'd been placed in the New York training school for girls in Hudson, which was the kind of institution that the 1930s called a reformatory, and which was, by any honest accounting, a place of punitive hardship rather than genuine care. She'd eventually run away. Lived on the streets of Harlem through some of 1934, homeless, hungry, wearing whatever she could find or borrow, sleeping in places not meant for sleeping. 17 years old and entirely on her own, she danced to earn money for a while. Then someone had convinced her to enter amateur night at the Apollo Theater. She'd meant to dance. She'd planned to dance. She'd stood in the wings of the Apollo looking at the audience and felt something freeze in her, the particular terror of a young girl who has been living rough and is wearing second-hand clothes and knows she doesn't look the way you're supposed to look when you're trying to impress an audience of sophisticated Harlem music fans. She changed her mind and decided to sing instead. The rest was history that nobody in the Grammy ballroom in 1968 needed to be told. But it wasn't history to Ella, it was the morning of her life, the beginning from which everything else extended. And moments like this one had a way of pulling her back to it, reminding her that the distance between that girl in the wings of the Apollo and the woman walking toward a Grammy stage was enormous and inexplicable, and something she would never fully understand. She reached the stage, climbed the steps carefully. She was beginning to have some difficulty with her knees, though she didn't mention this. Publicly crossed to the podium, the presenter handed her the Grammy. She held it, looked at it, looked out at the room, 1,200 people looking back at her. She had done this before, she knew how to do this. There was a standard form: gratitude to the Academy, gratitude to producers and musicians, gratitude to fans, brief and professional and appropriate. She could deliver it in her sleep. She opened her mouth and the standard form did not come out. "I don't know," she said, "why you keep giving these to me." The room went quiet in the particular way rooms go quiet when something unexpected has been said, not shocked silent, but listening silent, registering that this was different from what they'd expected. "I mean that," she continued. Her voice was steadier than she felt. "I'm not being," she paused, searching for the right word, "I'm not being falsely modest. I genuinely don't know why, out of all the voices that exist in the world, mine keeps getting singled out like this." Someone in the room laughed softly, not dismissively, but with recognition. The kind of laugh that means, "I understand exactly what you're saying, and it's both funny and true. I was a girl from Yonkers," Ella said. "I want you to understand that. Not a girl from a musical family, not a girl with lessons and training and people who saw something in her and developed it from the beginning. A girl from Yonkers who had no business being on any stage and who walked onto a stage at the Apollo Theater in 1934 because somebody dared me to, essentially, and who has been on stages ever since because," she stopped. Her voice had done something it rarely did in public. "Because I didn't know how to. Stop, because once I found out that music was the thing, that it was the only thing that made sense to me, I couldn't figure out how to be anything else." The room was completely still. "Every time I think about retiring," she said, "every time I think about whether it's time, whether I've said what I had to say, something like this happens." She held up the Grammy slightly. "And I have to take it seriously. I have to believe that there are people who want to hear what I have to say with this voice. Even though I'll listen to a recording of myself tomorrow and hear everything that's wrong with it." She paused. "I don't like listening to myself, by the way, in case you were wondering." Laughter again, warmer this time. "But I keep singing because it's what I have to give. It's the only thing I know with certainty how to do. And when the people in this room tell me," she stopped again, breathed, "when you tell me it's worth something, I believe you. I'm trying to believe you." She looked at the Grammy in her hands. "Thank you," from the girl from Yonkers who still can't quite believe any of this. She left the stage. The applause that followed her was different from the applause when she'd walked up, warmer, something in it that wasn't just celebration of achievement but recognition of a human being. The particular response of an audience that has been given something unscripted and genuine. Norman was waiting for her at the side of the stage. He'd watched the speech from there, having positioned himself carefully after following her path toward the podium. "That was not what I expected," he said. "It wasn't what I expected either," Ella said. "It was good. I talked too much. You talked exactly the right amount." She looked at the Grammy in her hand. "I really didn't think it was going to be me tonight. I know. I had a whole night planned around not winning. I was going to have dinner after. There's a restaurant on." "Ella, what? You won. Have the dinner anyway, and stop being surprised that you keep winning." "I can't help it. I know, Norman said again. That's what makes you, he stopped. What? That's what makes you Ella Fitzgerald, the fact that 34 years in you're still surprised. She thought about this. Is that a compliment? Absolutely. It doesn't feel like one. It is. He started walking them back toward their table. It means you haven't gotten comfortable. You haven't started thinking of success as your right, rather than something you earn every time, every performance. You're still surprised anyone shows up. I am, Ella admitted. That's the secret, Norman said. Most artists stop being surprised. They start expecting the recognition, and when you expect something, you stop working to deserve it. I work harder every year, Ella said, because I'm more aware every year of everything I don't know, everything I can't do, everything that could be better. Exactly. That sounds like a problem. It's the thing that makes you irreplaceable. They reached their table. Ella set the Grammy down carefully in front of her place setting and looked at it in the candlelight, this physical object representing a decision made by people in a room she wasn't in, choosing her voice out of all the voices that existed. She would never fully understand why. That was the honest truth. She'd been trying to understand it for 34 years and hadn't gotten there yet and suspected she wouldn't. The girl from Yonkers, who had no business being on any stage, still there, still winning, still unable to quite believe it. Backstage interviews after the ceremony were routine, a few minutes with journalists who wanted a quote for their publications, the standard currency of awards night coverage. Ella was professional and gracious and said the appropriate things. Then one journalist asked something different. Miss Fitzgerald, in your acceptance speech you said you don't know why you keep winning these awards. Did you mean that literally? Ella considered the question. I meant it completely literally, yes. But surely after 34 years, I understand even less than I did at the beginning, Ella said. At the beginning, I assumed there was something I was doing that was causing people to respond the way they did. I assumed I could figure it out and then do it deliberately and then control it. After 34 years, I've given up on that. I can't control it. I don't fully understand it. I know how to sing. I know techniques. I know how to prepare. I know how to approach a song. But the thing that happens between a voice and a listener, why some voices reach into people and some don't, I can't explain that. I just know that my voice apparently does something for some people, and I'm grateful, and she paused, I'm genuinely surprised every time, even at this point in your career, especially at this point in my career. I know too much now about how many things I can't do. About the limits, about the places my voice doesn't go that it used to go or never went. The younger you are, the less you know about your own limitations. By now I'm very familiar with mine. That's a surprisingly humble position for someone with, the journalist gestured, meaning the Grammy, meaning the career. I'm not being humble, Ella said. I'm being accurate. Humility implies I'm downplaying something. I'm not downplaying anything. I'm telling you what I actually experience when I sing and when I hear myself singing and when I receive something like this. She looked at the Grammy she was holding. I experience genuine uncertainty, whether it's good enough, whether I've done justice to the song, whether the audience received what I was trying to give. And then someone gives me this and I think, okay, apparently it's working, but I couldn't tell you why. The journalist wrote something in her notebook. The girl from Yonkers, she said. The girl from Yonkers, Ella agreed, who still hasn't figured out what she's doing up there, but keeps going up there and keeps winning, and is very confused about that, Ella said, then finally a small smile, but grateful. In the car afterward, heading back to her hotel, Ella was quiet for most of the drive. The Los Angeles streets moved past the windows, the particular quality of a city at midnight that has contained an enormous amount of human activity and now is settling, its energy dissipating into the ordinary darkness. Norman, who understood her silences and had learned decades ago not to fill them with words that weren't needed, sat beside her and let the city pass. At one point, Ella said, without particular context, do you think it ever goes away? What? The feeling of not deserving it. Norman was quiet for a moment. He thought about the question carefully rather than giving her the easy answer, which was yes. The easy answer would have been a kindness. It would also have been a lie. I don't know, he said honestly. I've never seen it go away in you. 34 years, Ella said. 34 years, he agreed. That seems like a long time to still be feeling like the girl from the Apollo Wings. The girl who almost danced instead of sang, Norman said. She looked at him. You know that story. I know everything about you, Ella. It's been 34 years for me too. A silence. Outside, a traffic light changed from red to green and the car moved through an intersection. I've been waiting for the feeling to resolve, Ella said. For some moment when I would know, settled and certain that I'd earned my place, that I didn't have to prove it again every time I walked on a stage. Has that moment come? No, and I'm beginning to think it won't. Maybe it's not supposed to, Norman said. Maybe for some people it's just there, permanently, and what you do is find a way to work despite it. Or because of it, Ella said quietly. Norman looked at her. What do you mean, the not being sure, she said. It makes you prepare more, practice more, take every performance seriously because you're not confident the next one will go well. You can't coast on certainty because you don't have any certainty to coast on. That's what I was trying to say earlier about the artists who stop being surprised. You said it differently. You said I haven't gotten comfortable. Same thing, maybe, Ella said. Or maybe being comfortable is what you feel when you've resolved the uncertainty, and some of us just never resolve it. And keep winning anyway. She looked down at the Grammy in her lap. And keep winning anyway. She paused, which continues to confuse me enormously. Norman smiled. Good, good. The day you stop being confused by it is the day I start worrying. She was right, it never went away. The imposter syndrome that had lived in her since the girl from Yonkers first walked onto a stage never fully resolved into confidence. It just became familiar, a companion, something she carried and kept working beside night after night, record after record, Grammy after Grammy. The girl from Yonkers who had no business being on any stage, still there at the end, still not entirely sure she deserved to be, still the best there ever was.